everyone. My name is Emily again. I'm a senior here at UD and I'm studying international relations with a regionalization in Latin America. I'm going to start this presentation by taking you back 6 years ago to my freshman year of high school. I had just come home from school and was laying on my couch scrolling through my Twitter feed when I came across the hashtag #PrayForNewtown. And I didn't know what it meant, but after clicking on the hashtag and following the link, I was instantly connected to dozens of articles explaining the tragedy that had occurred up in Sandy Hook Elementary School. And along with feeling heartbroken for the victims and their families, I also remember being fascinated that Twitter had been my first point of contact with the news story. Over the last 6 years, I've noticed how social movements across the United States and around the world have turned to social media and turned it from a place of internet humor and memes to a really powerful tool for advocacy, unity, and empathy. So when the Me Too movement went viral last fall, I began to wonder how it could be benefiting women in Latin America. And pretty early on in my research, I discovered that Me Too had hit Latin America in the form of Yo Tambien, which is a direct translation of Me Too. However, it caused much less of an uproar in the region as it did in the United States. And I think this is probably due to the fact that workplace harassment and abuse is generally a much lesser concern for Latin American women, because the real problem happens at home behind closed doors with partners. The domestic violence rate, according to the United Nations, is as high as 50% in some countries in the region. And according to the World Health Organization, sexual abuse is considered an epidemic because women over the age of 15, 1 in 3 have been victims of sexual abuse. So to understand how young people are using social media and how it ties into advocacy, I created a Qualtrics survey that I distributed to some friends in the region. I expected to get about 50 responses, but I was excited to see that they kept coming in, and I ended up getting 185 responses from countries throughout the region. I received responses from places where I don't have any personal contacts, which goes to show the power of social media. I shared the link through Facebook Messenger. One of my friends from Mexico shared it in his university's Facebook page, so that's where I ended up getting a lot of responses from. I just put a demographics of my subjects. About 80% identified as female, about 20 as male, and a little over 1 as other. So to begin, I wanted to know what platforms users are on and how often they're using them. So I asked them to rank their usage for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, Reddit, Snapchat, and WhatsApp. And this is zoned in on platforms that they claim to use every day or every other day. So everybody take a minute and kind of compare that to your usage and the usage that you believe your friends to be on. As you can see, the top 3 platforms were WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. I found personally the most interesting that Twitter was only at 15%. I use Twitter multiple times a day, and I rely on it for a lot of my fast updates on news stories. Like I said, Sandy Hook, that's how I found out about it. That's the first viral hashtag that I noticed for advocacy, but since then there's been a ton that I've discovered through Twitter. Then I asked them if they use social media to stay up to date on news around the world and in their country, and as you can see, 85% said that they had. I also wanted to know how reliable they believed their social media sites to be. And again, as you can see, about half of my respondents rated it as 5, which was somewhat reliable. And then about 30% rated it as more reliable than unreliable. Then I wanted to know how they identified, if they identified as a feminist, and I was excited to see that 70% in fact did. Only 14% said no, and the remaining 16% said that they preferred not to say or weren't sure. But understanding that I'm a white woman from the United States, my idea of feminism might be a little bit different than somebody in Latin America, so I wanted to hear from them. I got some interesting responses. I got a ton, so it was hard to pick out some of my favorites. These were more negative perspectives of feminism. My favorite out of this one is being annoying and stating an opinion as if it was a fact. You can read through these. These were more optimistic. I liked them better. I bolded a couple of my favorites. So. Actually, I'm going to go back. There were way more positive, optimistic definitions of feminism, despite the 14% that said no, the total 30% that didn't identify as feminists. And I think this is due to the fact that there's still a really strong stigma in Latin America by being branded a feminist. A lot of activists attribute this to machista culture, which I want to acknowledge that I don't have enough time to really dive into because it's a really intricate part of Latin American culture, but more progressive connotations, or more progressive people have negative connotations with the word. It's responsible for really strict gender roles in society, and it's taboo to branch out of them. So because feminists' mission is to break down these gender roles, it's still considered taboo. Okay, so then I asked if they thought social media had increased their ability to participate in politics or to be a feminist. 75% said yes, which is really cool, and 60% said yes, specifically for feminist movements. Then I wanted to know if they could think of any movements that had gone viral on social media recently. And again, got a lot. These weren't all of them, but these were ones that kept coming up. I highlighted some in pink that, as you can tell probably, are in Spanish and Portuguese, but they're all related to feminist movements. Yo te creo is yes, I believe you. No is no is no is no. Todos somos mujer is we're all women. And then you might recognize some of these too. They were also viral in the US, again showing that social media has the power to transcend all sorts of boundaries. This is my favorite question in the whole survey, and it says, have you ever joined a movement because of something you saw or read on social media? And as you can see, the numbers are pretty promising. Only 12% of the subjects said that they hadn't been involved in any movement. So, by raise of hands, how many of you have heard of the movement Ni Una Menos? Okay, so almost no one. Ni Una Menos means not one less. And it was a movement that I would compare to the Me Too of the United States in Latin America. It originated in 2015 with the goal of reducing violence against women, primarily femicide, which is the systematic killing of a woman due to her gender. The United Nations ranks the top 25 countries for highest femicide rates. About 14 of them lie in Latin America, so that's well over half. It's a huge problem in Latin America, and Ni Una Menos has created a lot of real, tangible change to address the problem. They've been responsible for some of Latin America's biggest marches in history. So I wanted to see, like on paper and in research, it looks like they've created a lot of change, but I wanted to know among young people on social media what they thought. They definitely raised a lot of good critiques. One respondent said it was exclusive because it only was really popular in areas where young white women had been killed, which I thought was interesting, and raises a point about intersectionality, how important that is to have in all of these movements. Some people argued that it didn't leave the internet, only engaged with people already interested in the cause, and something that could be counterproductive because of violence or misunderstanding that spurs from not having a very unified front at a lot of these marches. But on the other hand, there was also a lot of praise. People said that movements like Ni Una Menos through social media raise awareness, fills the void left by mainstream media by giving a voice to those who wouldn't otherwise have one. Unites and empowers women, starts a conversation, spreads empathy, and through social media creates an accessible and easy audience. So, all in all, has social media been effective in promoting change for feminist movements and activists in the region? And I argue absolutely. The main takeaways that I want you to have is that yes, there still is a very long way to go. There's a strong stigma in the region, even among my subjects who I imagine are probably more progressive. I doubt that my survey reached rural parts of Latin America where the stigmas are the worst and where the situation of women is worse. But that being said, even among my progressive subjects, it was still representative. Like I mentioned before, inclusivity and intersectionality must always be at the forefront of all of these movements. The Me Too movement, many people don't realize, was founded in 2007, I believe, by Tamara Burke, with the original goal of targeting poor, underprivileged victims of sexual assault for women of color. And when it went viral last fall, it was great that it opened the audience and started a bigger conversation, but again, in doing so, it sort of became whitewashed, and then that vulnerable group of people were kind of overlooked. So in Latin America, people who are often excluded from these movements are, again, women of color, indigenous women, and members of the LGBTQ community. But again, with all that said, I think young people plus awareness equals change. Young people are the ones who are on social media. They're the ones who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And by seeing all this stuff on their news feeds, they're going to be more aware of the problems that the world is facing. I have some unfortunate news. Neonomenos, most recently has been known for bringing abortion laws to the Senate in Latin America, or in Argentina, I'm sorry. And we've been really hoping that they would get passed, but I checked the news this morning and it was just shut down by the Senate, so it didn't get through. But it's still a really big thing in the first place that the laws got put to vote in the first place. So like I said, there is real tangible change that Neonomenos has brought about, and hopefully they'll continue. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who made this project happen. Victoria is not here, but she was awesome to help me throughout the summer. Professor Julio Caria was my advisor, the undergraduate research program for funding, and CISD International, which is responsible for my contacts in the region. Without their help, I wouldn't have been able to distribute my survey. So with that, if anyone has any questions,